Hello, Sabina Brennan here, host of Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. It takes just 30 seconds on Google or Apple Pay to make a one-off donation to support this show. Simply follow the Support This Show link in the show or episode description. Cheers.
Don't let things pass you by.
I try to live for the future.
We're stronger together.
This is Journeys Through Pulmonary Fibrosis, sharing heartwarming and courageous stories from people affected by a rare lung condition. Listen for free on your favourite podcast app.
Hello and welcome to Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. My name is Sabina Brennan and today's episode is coming to you from the Superbrain shed in my garden. So please forgive any less than perfect sound. Thanks to COVID-19, I am on a very steep learning curve. My guest today is the fantabulous Dermot Whelan. Dermot is a comedian, actor, broadcaster and the Dermot half of the Dermot and Dave radio show on Today FM. But actually, what I'm drawn to and why I want to speak to you today, Dermot, is that you are now a certified Masters of Wisdom and Meditation teacher.
Yes, I am. As obnoxious as that title is, that's what I am. That's what I am now. I'm a meditation teacher. I got that certification in California, so you can sense the Californian in it. But I am delighted. It's certainly a new string to my bow in the last few years, and it's something I'm getting enormous pleasure from.
Am I right to say that your journey to meditation began when, despite having many things in your life to be happy about, you felt that a sense that your life lacked joy and that started to overwhelm you?
It's like a slow drip that bit by bit you can feel that you are losing an essence of joy or an essence of yourself. So this chap who I was talking to was a very successful architect. He had his own business. He had just landed a massive city contract, which was going to see his company, doing really well for the next few years. He had a beautiful wife. He had the lovely kids. He had the lovely house. He had ticked all the boxes. So he was sort of at a loss as to go, well, I have all these things that society has promised me are going to bring me fulfillment. Yet here I am. I'm happy, but I'm not happy. And I think that's when we have happy, but we don't have the fulfillment side of it, that we can tick those boxes. And yes, we're not miserable, we're not depressed, but there's just something missing. And I think for many people, that's something that they can relate to, that maybe they remember a time in their life, whether it's real or just perceived, but that they were, in their minds, more joyful and more fulfilled, and maybe they had less. Maybe they weren't in that perfect relationship. Maybe they were single. Maybe they were traveling. Maybe they were independent. Whatever it is, meditation certainly for me was one of those tools where I was able to regain that sense of self, regardless of what I was doing professionally or in my relationships, that I managed to reconnect with that, intangible essence that was me. Now, it comes and goes. We're very fluid machines, and some days we can feel wonderfully fulfilled and connected to others and ourselves, and other days we can feel isolated and alone and not understand why. But certainly meditation for me put me in that place where either I was feeling more fulfilled or I was okay with the fact that at that particular moment I wasn't feeling it.
Because I think what you say, and this is something that I think is very important. I mean, you had a job that you at this point in time where you started to feel that you'd lost yourself and lost your sense of joy, that you had everything, that you had a great job, a lovely family relationships. There wasn't anything in particular that you could say you were dissatisfied with, but somehow there was something that you said, as you said, that you weren't getting that joy, you weren't, feeling that connection with self. And I just, wonder about that, is that not somehow just a way for life to give us a nudge to say, right, you've you've done this, you've got this far, you can kind of do this with your eyes closed. It's pretty good. Now it's time to challenge yourself to do something more, something, that will give you that buzz again.
Yeah, it is. But I think getting that nudge is so important as well. But a lot of us go too long without getting the nudge or giving ourselves the nudge. We do change, and our desires change, and our needs change, and sometimes we can just remain on autopilot. We're just on automatic programming, and when we do actually turn around to take stock, we find that maybe there's been this gentle erosion of what we believe were our distinguishing features of our personality, and we find that maybe we're a poor photocopy of what we thought was our true selves. And the more instances we can put into our day and our week and our lives where we get a chance to assess what it is we want and the kind of values we want to have, then the more we're going to have that sense of self, and we'll keep updating it, updating our I suppose it's our personality software, much like we would constantly update our phones. And we don't want them to be running on old software. However, with our brains and our minds and our sense of self, as you well know, we often don't allow those parts of ourselves to upgrade or to refresh or to check in with them and go, okay, well, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I'm the person I am right now. So what's important to me right now, given all the things happening in my life? What's important to me? Is my career as important as I thought it was? Is it the friends I used to have? Have I let go of great relationships with best friends and old pals that used to make me feel fulfilled? Is it spending time with my kids? Is that now more important to me than getting that next promotion? So unless we constantly check in with ourselves, regularly check in with ourselves, because we can become obsessed as well, but unless we allow that space to periodically just review what's important to us, I think we find ourselves that we're just on that train and it has drifted down a track, and we can wake up one morning and not be sure where we are.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much all you've said there totally resonates with me. I mean, I think we do live a lot of our lives on autopilot, and there's value in that in some regard from your brain's perspective, because your brain is this really high energy organ, and so it's got to find ways to do things efficiently from an energy perspective. And that means that being able to do some things on autopilot without cognitively engaging uses up less energy. So that's why you can get up in the morning, you can get dressed, have your shower, go downstairs, make your breakfast, eat it on autopilot. Your brain can just do that without you consciously thinking about, I need to put my arm in through this sleeve, but it also means then you go down and you have a breakfast without consciously thinking about what you're eating. And so thankfully, we have an override button, which is, really our prefrontal cortex, our executive functions that can sort of, take that step back and an overview and go, well, actually, do you really want to be doing that thing every single day, or do we need to switch it up a little bit? And I think you're so right. I think we just, it's sort of lazy in a sense. It's easy to just keep on doing what you were doing to a certain point. But as you said, then sort of life begins to lose its luster and its excitement and its sense of purpose and joy. And also your brain will lose brain cells then, because, it only needs X amount to just keep chugging along on that train, that driverless train. And I think, certainly for your brain, one of the best things that you can do is challenge it, because every time you learn something new or challenge yourself, your brain will grow new connections, and you want as many connections and as many brain cells as possible to keep your brain healthy. So challenge is critical. And I'm totally with you on that around revisiting where you are and what you're doing, because even you can actively set goals. I certainly sort of did that. I mean, I've had a bit of a strange life, I've kind of done a lot of things backwards, but, I'm fine with that. But we can set ourselves targets, but actually really without thinking fully about those targets, whether they are what we really want or whether they're what society expects of us, etc. You know, just because you do, say, as I did, a PhD in research, you know, should your next steps be to try and get, you know, hundreds of academic papers published in, you know, great academic journals, because that's what university researchers do. And it's very easy to go down that trajectory. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. But I think you're spot on. Every so often, we have to just pull back and ask ourselves what we really want. I certainly did that a few years ago, and to my surprise was found, you know, I found it a fantastic exercise, because I find it very hard. And I don't know whether it's particularly for Irish people or just Irish women, but I find it hard to say no to people, you know, when you're asked to do things and all of a sudden you find you're doing lots of things, but they may not necessarily be things that you actually want to do. Anyway, I did an exercise and I advise people to do it, but and you've probably already done it by the sounds of things. And that really is to literally take some time out, make an appointment with yourself and write down all the things you are, you know, mother, father, wife, sister, broadcaster, you know, accountant, whatever, friend, and all the things that you do. And you must never let anyone see this list.
Yeah.
You need to put opposite each of those is why you do it and how much you love doing it or being it. It's very enlightening. It really, really is. But I just found it absolutely fantastic, because I realized that a huge proportion of my life I was devoting to doing stuff for other people, you know, from a work perspective that was benefiting them rather than actually taking me along a journey where I felt I had value and meaning and purpose.
And a lot of that can be driven from fear as well, I think. You know, we can be, one of the reasons, again, why we tend to say yes, want to say yes to everything, particularly if you're a bit of an entrepreneur or maybe, you know, trying to run a few businesses at once. There's that fear of, well, if I say no, I'm going to miss out. So yes, you can actually be operating your entire work schedule from a position of fear, as opposed to saying, okay, what is really important to me? What is the work that I want to be doing this time next year? That's the stuff that I will say yes to. And everything else, if it doesn't fit into that category, then I must say no to it, you know?
Yeah, you've done exactly. That's exactly what I did, you know? I said, well, I love doing this. I love doing this. You know, this matters. And, you know, I am going to start saying no unless this feeds to this for whatever reason. Now I fall off that wagon every now and then, you know, and for me as well, balance is something that I'm not very good at. You know, I tend to work and not take enough time out to not work, which is important as well. And sort of that's the way I would sort of fall off a bit sometimes as well. But that's human, you know, that's just being human. If we didn't make mistakes, we would never learn anything. We never grow. You know, making mistakes is actually, it's a funny way that we say it. Making mistakes is just learning. You know, you do something, oh, that doesn't work out. We'll try this way. And we actually need to have, I think, much more freedom to make those mistakes. I think society can be a little bit cruel in a way. And that kind of takes me back again, in a way, to that sense of self, because I think the further you delve into it, you can start asking your questions around, well, is that a part of me that I've always felt is the essence of me? Or is that a part of me where I felt that other people like that part of me the most? You know?
Yeah.
You drive yourself insane. But I think our sense of self, I mean, it's constructed by our brain, and I think it's constructed from our life experiences, but also influenced by society, culture, you know, significant people who have, you know, impacted on you in a way. But I think that's really positive, because if it has been constructed, you can kind of deconstruct and reconstruct and sort of rebuild yourself
Mm.
in a way.
Sometimes it can be surprising, and it kind of goes back to the point we mentioned about, these moments and these memories we have tucked away in our brains that are these pivotal moments that send us in different directions. And, one of the most constructive and enlightening and rewarding parts of studying as a meditation teacher was doing those exercises, and doing an exercise where I wrote down, it's essentially the story of your life. You start to write the story of your life and the things you think sent you in particular directions. And I realized that I had been furiously working in the comedic sphere and trying to establish myself in that sphere for years. And it was as if I had been catapulted in that direction from these pivotal moments as a teenager. Maybe I was being picked on. I saw comedy as my defense mechanism, and realized that, I'm kind of good at this. I can make people laugh. And that trajectory continued for decades, into my life. And without ever really thinking, hang on a sec, is this what the now version of me wants? So,
yes.
Am I still operating software that was written when I was 17?
I mean, I just think that's so true for pretty much everyone. And I think that we live so long now, so much. There's room for, like, when it comes to career, as far as I'm concerned, there's room for at least 3 careers. Do you know what I mean? But it's like you're set on this path. Like childhood and teen years are they're so formative, but as you've just said, you change so much, and then why are you still going down that road when actually you know yourself better now, and could make different choices?
Yeah, but again, it's back to this automatic programming that our brain is so good at, and it's doing this really efficient job, as you say. But it reminds me of a golden retriever I used to have when I was growing up called Heidi, who used to run through the back garden, and she used to run exactly the same path, so much so that the grass was completely worn away, and there was no reason for her to follow that little path through the back garden every day. But that's what she did, and I'm sure the dog didn't think about it. It was just, that's what she was used to doing. So it always stuck in my head as a symbol for how many of us can just automatically follow the same path. I mean, a few months ago, I remember walking to my car in the car park after work, and I arrived at the space where I usually park, and it was empty, and I realized that I'd gotten the train. So, and you feel like a complete fool, but it's also a kind of a, wow, I am really on automatic pilot here. Do you remember one of my favorite movies of all time is Airplane, and that inflatable automatic pilot that that just inflated and sat there with this gormless smile on its face flying the jet, and that was its job, and I think we all become that inflatable airplane automatic pilot from time to time. And it's introducing exercises, whether it's meditation or whatever it is works for you, that question that process and question that behavior. And, you may find, I've always wanted to be a traffic warden since I was 11, and I still do at 40. Yeah. So that, great, keep doing it. You're doing what you love. But you may find that actually, I wanted to work in a bank, because I wanted something secure, because my home life as a teenager wasn't secure. But now I'm 36, and, those things aren't true for me anymore. So maybe there's an option for me to explore other avenues.
Yeah, and it is about exploration, and I think exploration is a great word because it's exciting. Like, it's not introspection; it's exploring, and it's looking at possibilities and looking at different futures. I think it's empowering. I think an awful lot of people, go through life feeling that things happen to them, and without realizing that they have much more control than they think. I do think it doesn't help that we have so much focus on certainly in Western society, on, money, as if money somehow makes you happy, and the research suggests that, obviously you need sufficient money for your needs, roof over your head and food and clothing. But actually, once you get beyond those basic requirements, there's no relationship between the amount of money someone has and their happiness. I think that's a very, very sort of important take-home message. Of course, if you're in poverty, if you can't, if you don't have enough to eat, money is hugely important and necessary. But once those needs are met, accumulating more money and more things doesn't actually make you inherently happy. They're nice, but it doesn't get at that thing that you were talking about, that sense of finding yourself, whatever that is. I don't know. I think it's more about a oneness. I mean, I don't know if you've ever come across the Japanese concept of ikigai, Ikagai. There's a couple of ways to pronounce it, but
I know a few women who've met them in bars. Ikigais.
That's exactly how I remember how to say it. He's an ikigai, because otherwise I can't figure out how to say it. Anyway, I kind of only read about it a couple of years ago, and after I'd written my book, and the reason it sort of sang to me is sort of the principle that I lived my life on, and then I think it's kind of nice when you discover something like that. Oh, that's kind of really an ancient Japanese philosophy, but it's kind of my philosophy. But basically, if you think of a Venn diagram, and they talk about finding your ikigai, there's no equivalent word in the English language. Probably the closest you can get to it is the French, and I'm not a French speaker, but raison d'être, reason for living. The reason why you would jump out of bed in the morning as opposed to drag yourself out of bed. And basically, they consider it that it is where four things intersect. So if you imagine, four circles of a Venn diagram, it's the point where all four of those intersect and overlap. And basically what they are is doing something that you love, something that you are good at, something that the world needs, and finding a way to be paid for it. Now, I think I've got the first three sewn up. Absolutely sewn up. The one I struggle on is the fourth. But you know what? It's probably the one that I can manage less with, once I don't. Well, who knows, after COVID-19, none of us have jobs for the most. I just think there are things. I mean, that's what I said to my kids. I had my kids in my 20s, and I was in a job. And with hindsight, I mean, I know why I took that job. I was the youngest of 5 children. My father worked in a life assurance company, and, what a lot of people don't realize is sort of people my age, people really didn't go to university. It was only a very select few who got to university, and particularly if you were a female. It was generally the sons and daughters of professional people. My father worked in a life assurance company, and he had a nice job, but he never went to university. But one of his big wishes for his kids was that one of his kids would work there, Yeah. And the 4 ahead of me didn't, used to sit an entrance exam or whatever, and they kind of didn't get in. And I kind of went, oh, well, I'll be that person. I'll do that. And so I went and worked there, and it was a very nice job, nice in terms of it was a well-paid job. It allowed me, you could get a preferential mortgage. So it allowed me kind of get on a property ladder far sooner than I ever would have otherwise. But I absolutely hated every minute of the job itself. Loved the people, had loads of great friends. It was one of those, probably the equivalent of these social media companies now, although without all the bells and whistles that they have. But it did have a recreation centre that had a swimming pool, so it was just really sort of a fab place to work. But I spent 15 years of my life there. Yeah. When you think about it. And you used to save money to go on holidays or to go to the pub or go out partying, so that you that made up for the day job that you hated. But then I had my kids in my 20s, and I went, okay, I really, really want my kids to find something that they love doing, and, get the trick then of finding someone to pay them to do it. And then I kind of went, God, kids learn by experience, and they learn by imitation and through what you do them. And I said, I'm not doing this. So I jacked in my job actually, and qualified as a drama teacher, and then sort of became an actor for 10 years. But that's probably one of my moments. Every so often I have these moments where I stop, take stock, and change. And
yeah, but you're lucky that you have that level of self-belief, and are willing to engage with that fear of blowing things up to change. But I suppose in an ideal world, none of us want to have to blow up our lives at any point and do the big dramatic, that's it, I'm off to India, I'm living in an ashram, as you storm out of the centre and throw your t-shirt on the ground. But I still think there's a hangover from that time where, in terms of the money, that one circle of the icky guy that's missing. That's the only way I can remember. I nearly said itchy guy there, which is a totally different type of person to avoid in the bar. But, I still think there's a hangover in terms of that, money is something you earn from something you hate doing. I still think there's quite a lot of that, just grin and bear it, put the head down. Yeah, you may not like the office job, but suck it up, particularly now when, people are lucky to have jobs. And I still think, I definitely feel that the generations behind us now are more okay with the idea of earning money for stuff that you love doing, and that's what you should be aiming for. That we don't have to sacrifice or take on work that we don't enjoy and sort of wear the misery as a badge of honor. I think that way of living is being shaken up all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows now? Everything's been shaken up, and that's kind of a challenging time for people at the moment, going back to that sort of anxiety and stress, and why meditation can help. And I do want to go back again to that. Am I right to say that you did feel very stressed and even sort of had a panic attack?
Yeah, I think the panic attack came earlier. That was in around 2007, and that happened when I was driving down to to perform at a comedy festival. And I was new to stand-up comedy, relatively new, and obviously it's quite a nerve-wracking thing to do anyway. And I suppose I wasn't handling stress very well because I had a lot going on. I had small children at home, babies at home. I had a breakfast radio job, which had me up at, pre 5 a.m. I was working in comedy clubs 4 days a week, late at night. And I was probably, using wine or beer as most people do for stress relief and not much else. And then I was on the way down to this comedy festival, and I felt very strange. And anyone who's listening, who ever had a panic attack, will know it's quite a terrifying ordeal that I thankfully have never had since. But I felt like somebody was sitting. It was like I was driving along in the car and I was outside Kilkenny, and it was like the invisible man came in and just sat on me. And I could feel all the air sort of being pushed out of me, and a sense of that my blood had become fizzy. That's a weird way to describe it. But you remember the kind of black and white fuzz you used to get on old televisions if they weren't tuned into a channel. It was like my body was filled with that. So I began to feel very, very strange, and I pulled the car over to the side of the road, and I realized that my breathing was very labored, and what I didn't know is that I had started to hyperventilate, because what happens if you don't know what's happening in a panic or anxiety attack, you start to become more anxious because you think, I'm having a heart attack or a stroke. So that kind of perpetuates it and makes it worse. And I was starting to hyperventilate, which meant that all my limbs then went into spasm, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die in a hard shoulder outside Kilkenny, 100 yards from a roundabout. This is not the rock and roll death I had anticipated for myself. But this is not something that will be written about in the annals for years to come.
Not Tommy Cooper dying on stage.
No, no. But, as it turned out, an ambulance came and,
Did you call the ambulance? Yeah.
Well, it happened that my brother-in-law was driving behind me and he had seen that I'd seen me pull in and he pulled in. So thankfully, yeah, I know. And so the lads arrived. I got into the ambulance. They gave me a brown paper bag and I was right as rain.
Right.
So, that certainly was a wake-up call.
But I'm not surprised you had that. I mean, you were not getting enough sleep. You were getting up for 5 a.m. and also doing, late night gigs. Sleep has evolved because it serves huge functions and is fundamental to every single aspect of your being. And so if you start cutting sleep short, your immune system will function, your brain won't be able to function properly, so many things. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, that's why I really loved the chapter in your book on sleep, because, I was reading it going, yes, this is why that happened. And now I get it. And, and the idea that we wash, our brain washes itself when we're asleep. I love that, that it's flushing out everything that it doesn't need and preparing us for the day ahead.
Yeah, preparing us for the day ahead, but also you actually really eliminating toxins, that have built up because it doesn't really have that lymphatic system that the rest of your body does, which is interesting. And while we talk about that as well, you said sort of back then before you started meditating, you'd also experienced brain fog.
Yes, I did. Brain fog was something that I definitely was familiar with, and it's one of those things that not everybody can relate to when you talk about it. But for me, it was a very real thing. The best way I can describe it is, when you get a delivery of something in a package or a box, and the box is filled with those styrofoam S's, those?
Yes, I do.
And imagine you're looking for something that's relatively small in the box, and you'll be moving around in that styrofoam, and you might catch a glimpse of it for a second, and then it's gone again. And it's almost an impossible task to find the item in the middle of all that styrofoam. And for me, that's what it was like trying to think of something. It was just as if my brain was so full of, this mental styrofoam that I couldn't think straight. No matter what I was trying to think about, it just wouldn't work for me. And it was a feeling that my brain was overloaded.
So what you said there, that description is absolutely, I'm actually writing a book now at the moment about brain fog. So I'm kind of fascinated by it and have delved into it. I have experienced it myself on a number of occasions in very different ways, but I've never heard it quite described like that. It's a very, very good description, because what I'm seeing there is then the more you delve into that box trying to push those bits aside, the more you've disrupted where the thing is.
Yeah.
Right, you're going to be able to find it.
Exactly. And, there's a sense that your brain is overloaded. It's like a sponge that is so saturated with liquid that it just can't take any more. And I remember the feeling of, if I get an email, one more email in, I think my head is just going to sort of detach and roll off my shoulders. And, with that, you get poor memory, like really poor short-term memory. That can be really embarrassing at times, so you keep having to ask, what are we doing again? Yeah. And my radio job would demand that I'm on top of stuff and every second is accounted for, and what you've just said, what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And when that is skewed, it can be very upsetting and actually can cause you anxiety in itself. It can make you stressed, even though the cause of it is stress, and particularly trying to schedule future events. If somebody asks you, hey, are you free on Thursday week? You feel like getting into the fetal position under your desk, because you can't, it sounds so silly, but when you're in it, you just cannot cope with the idea of another. It's like Buckaroo, when
that's the final straw.
Yeah, what's the one last request that someone makes of your time that is going to just cause everything to fall apart, you know?
Yeah, and usually it'll happen, at the most inappropriate time, and you just explode over something that's completely disproportionate. But again, I'm not surprised you experience brain fog because, poor sleep, excessive or chronic, poorly managed stress will interfere with your cognitive functioning. And among other things, I mean, just for anyone listening, if they're not familiar with the term brain fog, it really is just, it's kind of an umbrella term that describes some issues that people experience with, like Dermot just said there, fuzzy thinking, difficulty concentrating, problems with memory, problems with learning, problems with being able to pay attention or focus, and also even things like word finding difficulties. For me, that actually would be something that would manifest. I kind of just can't. I almost end up like I'm playing a game of charades, trying to describe the word that I struggle to find. And then there's loads of, it's not a condition or a disease or a disorder in and of itself. It's really just a signal from your brain that something is amiss, and you really need to look and see what it is. And it could be that it's poor sleep or stress that you can deal with, but there can be underlying conditions, some autoimmune diseases, etc., are associated with that. And particularly for women too, hormone fluctuations, but also for men, fluctuations in testosterone can kind of give rise to brain fog. But I was really interested, to read and hear you actually, mention, that you had experienced brain fog just as a, from a gender perspective. It's something that women speak about a lot, and they'll use different terms. They could say baby brain, if it's associated with an autoimmune disease, it's fibro fog. And the thing is with autoimmune diseases as well, sort of a lot of them are, you have 9 females to every 1 male who will have them. But you do, women talk about having baby brain or menopause brain or pregnancy brain or whatever, where their hormones have changed. But you don't hear a lot of men actually talking about it. But what you do hear more from men is burnout and overwhelm, and more burnout. But I think that's interesting, in itself, that maybe it's more male or macho to say burnout, but at the end of the day, it's brain fog. And yes, it may be because you've been burning candles at both ends. I just think that's kind of something interesting. But have you found, since you've started meditation, that the brain fog has lifted?
100%, and it doesn't make you superhuman. And there are times, if I have a lot of things on at once, I can certainly start to see the signs, or pick up that, okay, maybe I need to take the foot off the gas. Or for me, it's kind of like the analogy of just having way too many tabs open on your browser, at the same time. Yeah. When I start to feel a little bit hazy in my thinking, or maybe I'm reacting a bit emotionally, or maybe just feeling a bit negative, then I'll go, okay, I know what this is because I've been through it. So what can I just close? What mental tab can I close for a couple of days? What can I say no to? What time can I carve out for myself so that I can rejuvenate and give my brain a chance to just refresh itself, And, I again, with the computer analogy, we do it with our laptops and we do it with our phones. We do it with our cars. We service our cars. We don't let it go too long. We restart our computers when they're getting slow. But when it comes to our brains and our minds, we're very slow to do anything to try and give it a chance to refresh itself.
And we just get cross with ourselves.
Yeah. And you get into a pattern of rapid fire questions internally. What's wrong with me? Have I got some illness? Why can't it be like other people? Are other people suffering from this? And the Googling begins then, and self-diagnosis.
The Googling begins and this episode ends, but don't despair, there's more. Tune in next week for part 2 of our chat. To learn more about Dermot's exciting new show, Mindful, which combines comedy and meditation, check out dermotwhelan.com. My name is Sabina Brennan and you've been listening to Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. Subscribe on Acast, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please take a moment to like and share.